we knew like what we like in a board and what, you know, some popular shapes are, like some general terms or knowledge, but we didn't know a lot of the specifics of, you know, what makes a board go faster in the water, what type of shape will make it more designed for a bigger wave or a smaller wave, what will give you more leverage to come off the bottom of the wave or go up off the top. So we learned a lot from doing that research, and like I said before, the reason we chose this project is because me and Soren both surf. We wanted to learn more about actually making the boards, and of course, finally, we wanted to have fun. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our research right now. So we looked at different websites. One website that was a big help to us was surfline.com, which is usually a surf forecasting website, but they have a lot of articles on there on how to shape different parts of the board. Like for example, the name of the side of the board, what you hold on to when you're like carrying it, that's called the rail. We read an article about that. Another good online resource was we used EBSCO to look up different magazine articles of interviews with shapers in Southern California, and I think one in Hawaii and one on the East Coast as well. Rusty Surfboards, Walden, well-known name from Southern California. In addition, we did real live interviews. We did one with our mentor, who you're going to hear about later, Ward Coffey, and one with Moore Maluka.
He's a friend from Denmark. He was a pro surfer from Israel. He ran the pro circuit and everything, and recently he settled down with his wife and kids and just started shaping, started a company in Denmark. And because I was so close to him, I was able to, really learn a lot about the process and dive into it really as soon as I started talking with him.
And so we used all those resources to guide our shaping and guide what we wanted in each of the boards. We chose 3 different designs. We're going to show you all of them at the end, our final product. And this was our mentor, Ward Coffey. He has a shop in Santa Cruz. If you talk to surfers in the community of Northern California or Greater California in general, most people have heard of this guy. He went down to a shaping competition in Southern California. I think it was in Santa Barbara a couple weeks ago, and he was well recognized. People knew about him. He's been surfing since he was like around 14, and he's been shaping. I think he started. He got first introduced to it when he was 16, and the way we used him as a resource is that we would do a bunch of work on our boards, and then we would come bring it to him, and he would either show us with some of his tools that we didn't have, or he has some special lighting that really helped us guide the way we shaped that we couldn't install because we had a more makeshift setup than he did. And he would give us tips and like tell us, you need to sand more here, this is like too accentuated, you need to sharpen your rails more if you really want to get a good looking board. And even though he shapes his boards, which is the sanding process, getting the shape you want, he also gave us some tips on how to glass. And glassing is both sealing the board to keep it watertight and putting fiberglass on top of it so it's actually more rigid. So the base board you actually get, it's just foam. If you put that in water, it's just going to soak it all up and pretty much disintegrate. So he gave us some tips on how to glass and different materials that we wouldn't have known we had needed, and some tricks from that as well. Like he told us to buy a lot of gloves, which was a good piece of advice. I think we went through quite a few gloves on that.
Oh, I have a box of 100 sitting at home. I've probably gone through half in just the past 4 days. So. Yeah, it's a lot of material. So along this long and bumpy road to completing our surfboards, we've had certainly a plethora of obstacles, and the first of which was completely out of our hands. When we first ordered our blanks and kits, shipping time was absurdly long. It took about 2 months. because they had to process and ship from New Jersey, and I guess they decided to bike it over from New Jersey. But either way, it resulted in us getting a significant setback on our time that we could have used to work ahead. And this, the second major one was scheduling, just in terms of finding times that would work for both of us. Typically on the weekends, Eugene would have a music rehearsal in the afternoon on Sunday, and I would have work in the morning, so they wouldn't really ever overlap at all. Probably one of the bigger ones when we got down to our shaping was our tool limitations. With our kits, we received only the very basics of tools, so a lot of it it was just a lot of menial grinding and sanding until we got the shape we wanted, which really did help us to understand how the material worked and how how finessed it really is when it comes down to the final touches, because we couldn't just power through it with a sander or an electronic planer. And another great challenge we had in this was finding a mentor. A lot of professional shapers in the Bay Area are very busy with their own intentions, with their own jobs and so on. So I would send out emails during class. I contacted basically the entirety of the NorCal surf area, which is the range from Half Moon Bay up to San Francisco. We did get one reply from them, but it was from a group called Sunset Shapers, and they did tell us that we could buy a lesson for $400 if we wanted to, which was out of our budget. And then we moved down to Santa Cruz, and of all the surf shops in the area, the only one that replied to us was thankfully a yes, and that was Ward Coffee. And he was so chill throughout the whole process, so involved, so invested in us as well, but also so flexible with his time that he could fit us in whenever, wherever. And probably one of the biggest in terms of our last and final steps was Eugene being injured. In our final stretch of glassing, he did suffer a fall, taking a hill on a longboard, so it did mean that I had to do a lot of the physical labor, which was hard, especially with the schedule that I had. But we powered right through. So, in terms of our surfboards, the process was, from the outside, fairly simple. The first things we had to do was decide our designs and so on, and we did that just by outlining and tracing some boards that we already had. The board that you see here was based off of a 510 surfboard that I had at home, and made with a fishtail for the purpose of carving through the face of a wave rather than trying to get barreled or anything like that. The second part, when you finish outlining and tracing, is you got to cut that out, and that was relatively difficult on its own because you're using a saw. There's plenty of friction because it's basically a fancy word for styrofoam, what the material is. And once we finished cutting everything out, it was time to begin the real work on shaping, which was sanding everything down by hand. It took hours and hours of work just to get to a basic point in our shapes. And along our shaping journey, we did meet with Ward. As Eugene had mentioned, we would show him our shapes, and he had a great lighting system at his shop that would really show us the curves and contours of our boards that we had achieved with our shaping, and it enlightened us on what we could do better in our next shapes. Specifically with our designs, I tried to really focus on the rails of the board. I'm very interested in a board that's sharp to turn and very responsive to the face of the wave, whereas Eugene was interested in the concave and how the flow of the water underneath the board can affect the ride. And the last step in this process, which I would say is by far the hardest and probably the most unexpectedly hardest step of the process, was glassing. The first step in glassing is you have to seal your board, and you mix epoxy with this silica filler, and that allows the board to essentially be protected from not only water but epoxy soaking into the board. And a problem that a lot of different shapers and glassers can have is that they don't seal a board, and when they don't do that, epoxy will soak into the board and create a very thin layer on the surface, but not a very not a very stable or sturdy board for surfing. And so when you put the seal on there, it prevents the epoxy from going into the board, and it maintains that very sturdy, rigid layer of epoxy that gives structural integrity to the surfboard in the first place. This process is super messy. There's a lot of places where you can breathe in fumes, chemicals, powder that can really mess with your health. The fume silica in particular, if you breathe that into your lungs, it will like begin to dissolve part of your lungs and so on. So it was very important that we had like filtration masks for this process. It would have seriously been a detriment to our health if we hadn't done so. But the use of the materials that we had was it was helpful in learning how different things can react. Epoxy resin mixing, very good that you use a 1-to-2 ratio of hardener to resin. If you don't have that exact ratio, things can go wrong. The first time I mixed it, I used a 2-to-1 ratio of hardener to resin, and within about 4 minutes or so, I had a fuming ball of plastic and epoxy in my hand that melted a couple pairs of gloves. So, very important that you know how to use your materials well, and that you take all safety precautions necessary.
And one other thing. A funny, I guess, story about this bottom right picture here is we got the actual foam kind of late at night, and we're like, okay, we've been waiting for this for a while. Let's go over and shape. So I came over to his house and we put on the headlamps and we started cutting out our outlines in the dark.
It was an experience to say the least.
Yeah.
And so our final product pictured here is on the left. I have my personal board, which was designed to be kind of a more high-performance surfboard. Eugene's board in the middle is an egg, designed to work in medium-sized waves, nothing too big, but work well as a beginning surfer starting to get into shortboarding. And the board on all the way to the right is the school. Is the board that we hope to donate to the school. Is a 5/6 fish, as I mentioned earlier, intended for carving. Each of these designs, we decided to change it up so that way we could not only experience the difference in shaping different shapes, but also glassing different shapes. And in particular, the fishtail was difficult in wrapping the rails with fiberglass cloth because you have to notch it, and you have to get it just right, or you have these fiberglass strings that start hanging off the back, and they can pull your fiberglass and resin off the board when it's curing if you don't watch it carefully enough, and it can lead to your board not being glassed properly.
That's it. Questions?
Thank you.
So were you happy with the performance of the board that you put together? I mean, you did this one, and then did you do these two, or were these ones you had?
We did these two first.
And so what was the performance like on these?
We haven't taken them in the water yet.
Okay.
Right.
Unfortunately, partly because I wasn't able to help him really too much this week
Mhm.
with the glassing process. I think they're all finished right now, but we have to take them out.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to do that. Yeah.
Has going through this process made you more conscious of the boards you have now when you surf and how they work and what's going on when you're on a wave?
It has made me grow a much greater appreciation for the quality of not only the aesthetics but the functionality of a surfboard. When it comes to little things like the little lumps and bumps in the glassing, I found that through interviews with my friend Moore and so on, the one thing that I drew away from his interview that really stuck out to me, not only is something interesting but also like kind of strange, was that the idea, if your glassing isn't perfect, it's not going to make that much of an impact on your overall performance of the board. It's only if you screw up majorly that anything will really happen. Even if it's not the greatest glass job in the world, it can still be a perfectly writable surfboard.
So it's the shaping.
Right.
It's really the critical element for
Yeah.
how it's going to perform.
Yeah.
I actually have two questions. One is just, are all surfboards made by hand? And if not, is there are manufactured surfboards considered to be more desirable, or handmade considered to be more desirable? And then the other question I had is, do you have plans or thoughts about a way to thank your mentor? Are there any ways that you're going to give back to him or honor him in a way that would stay with him the way that his work would stay with you?
I can answer the first part of that. In terms of manufacturing, you can go to Costco and you can get like a $90 sort of beginner board, and that's, I don't think anybody's hands really touch that in terms of the actual manufacturing process. The name is not coming to me right now, but basically, yeah, a lot of surfboards, they can be like milled by machine, and you just put the design in the computer and it does it all. So what actually a lot of even very popular shapers, what they'll do is they'll start out to get the basic shape like that, and then they'll do a lot of the finishing by hand and the minutia. But I think if you look at just the entire market of surfboards, you'll find stuff that completely handmade, stuff that's a little bit of both, and stuff that's completely done by machine.
And is the handmade considered to be the ultimate?
Yes, usually, because when somebody completely hand makes the board, it's, you know, it's a little bit, you can like put your actual inspiration into it more.
There's a lot more meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
When you get a custom shape from a shaper that's dedicated to you, you know that it's got purpose, it's got meaning, and it's got your personality and your character and your desires turned into a surfboard.
And then in terms of your...
In terms of the second part, I've often asked myself the same question, because the first thing that popped in my head was, oh, you know, we could spend part of the summer like shaping him a board or whatever, show him what we've learned, shaping glass on the board. But he's a shaper,
Yeah.
and he certainly knows what he's doing when it comes to glassing. And so I didn't feel that was like the right way to go about doing it. I still don't know myself, but it's definitely a question that I've considered, but I don't know quite how to approach an answer.
Would you do it again?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the correct terminology is, but like the fin underneath the surfboards, you guys gonna attach those? Because I don't see them.
Yeah,
Oh.
so there's
Are they
these
necessary?
these boxes, and you can see near the tail.
Oh, okay.
Actually, can you grab that actually?
Just show you around a little bit.
Yeah, so what we did with all the boards is we put these fin boxes in, and what's really good about that is you can pick and choose the fins you want. So the fins, those are completely machine made. You very seldom find the handmade fin anymore. So it's just like you just kind of just pop it in, and there's like a little latch.
Pop it
there.
in, and there's a little screw right here.
Yeah.
Tie it in nice and tight, and then.
What's it made of?
This is, on the inside, it's made of expanded polystyrene, which is just another word for styrofoam. And the outside is a mix of epoxy resin and 4-ounce fiberglass cloth.
I mean, the fins.
Oh, the fins tend to be made out of either plastic or fiberglass and plastic composite. It really depends. There's such a wide range of performance fins that go across, you know, the entirety of the pro circuit and everything. When you become professional, you start to notice the little things like how the fins are placed or what fins you even have in your board.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.